Hey folks, and welcome to Replay, the show where games are art. I've backtracked a little bit so that we can go back to the beginning of, I believe this is Albrook, the first town in the Imperial continent, the southern continent. I just wanted to, kind of go around, explore the Empire, talk a little bit about what the Empire has done to the places under its control. There are okay weapons on sale here. A little bit better than what I had, which makes sense. The Empire is the military superpower, after all. But the main thing of note I wanted to point out is, well, a few things. First of all, the presence of soldiers at the entrance to the town. They're controlling the passage of people in and out, clearly. Though they allowed us in. At least to that one entrance. They seem to be covering the others. Also, the empty treasure chests are a nice touch. They suggest that someone has already been here and looted the town. Namely, the Empire. You've got the artist's concern about the Emperor's not liking his portrait. That's also interesting. It suggests, first of all, that if the Emperor asks you to do something, you do it, and that there may well be some bad consequences if he doesn't like it. It's also interesting that the Empire has looted this place, given that the Empire's attitude is that everything belongs to them. It's interesting because, of course, that's the typical attitude of an RPG player. We go around looting everywhere we visit. We take everything from everyone. That's typical RPG behavior. And here that's being equated to the Empire. But let's unpack that a little. Because, of course, the reason RPG protagonists do that is because, basically, if you offer a player an opportunity at useful resources, they'll take it. Just as the Empire does with any resources it comes across. There's a key difference here, which is that, to the player, most players would not rob people blind in real life. They'll do it in a game because it's a game. And that's part of the rules of the game. It's permissible because these aren't real people. Problem is, they're not real people to the Empire either. Look at the way those waitresses are dressed. They're being presented as as effectively playthings for the Imperial soldiers. Look at the damage to the town the Empire has been through here. It's trashed the place. And it's taken everything that isn't hidden. The Empire are not nice people. We already knew that, but it's being explicitly framed as a sense of ownership, a sense of entitlement, a sense that everything belongs to them. You can't even do business without bribing them, as that guy just pointed out. Like I said, they've trashed everything. They've just kind of expanded out from the center of the continent and taken everyone. Which is an interesting point, that they have weak magical power, but that they have any at all is interesting. We might speculate on why that is exactly when we start encountering some monsters. Anyway, yeah, the point to be made here in Albrook is that the Empire has a sense of ownership. The Empire has claimed this place as belonging to them, and they just want total control over it. Again, they represent order, they represent control. Now we're out on the world map. We can move on to the next town. We'll probably get into a couple of fights along the way, and I can talk a little bit about some of the enemies here. Start with these freaky things. The game calls them chicken lips. I think they're probably cockatrices, given the combination of lizard and chicken parts. And it's interesting because a cockatrice is a creature that cannot exist naturally. A cockatrice traditionally is born from an egg laid by a rooster at midnight, which is a roundabout, semi-poetic way of saying impossibility, because roosters don't lay eggs, and they sleep at night. You know, they're very much diurnal animals. So, yeah, it's an impossible creature. And I think that's interesting, because we've certainly encountered monsters and things along the way, ghosts, that kind of thing, but we haven't there's Vector, but we'll come back to that. We haven't exactly encountered anything that could be identified as impossible. And then we've got these two things. A dog and a dude with a, what's it called? Umbrella. Interesting because, well, I killed him before he got the chance. But the Umbrella dude can actually cast lightning magic, if I remember correctly. Which is very, very interesting, because, of course, humans casting magic is an impossibility if they're not Terra or Celeste or have Magicite. So, what's going on here? Hang on, just doing a little bit of management on my espers. Seeing where I am, since I just learned something, and I didn't quite catch what it was. I think it was Antidote. Point it. He's done. Maybe he should take Ramuh? Yeah, and then somebody else takes Siren. Like Celeste. Yes, this will work. Anyway, like I was saying, so what are these guys doing out here? And one possibility is that they're monsters that just look like humans, but then why do the monsters on this continent know magic? So, my kinda speculation, theory, etc., is given the presence of impossible creatures, like cockatrices, these are the results of experiments. These are, like, these jokers are quite possibly early prototype Kefkas and Celestes. Their attempts at creating magic using humans that went badly wrong, and you're left with these monsters roving the countryside. The cockatrices are probably much the same. You know, they're also sort of animal experimentation. And let's save, and then let's go into, I think this is Tsen? Yes. So here, you know, the Empire kills anyone who opposes it. 3 cheers for the Empire. What a great juxtaposition that is. We murder everyone. We're the best. Again, we see a town that's very damaged, and has soldiers guarding the entrance. But there's a lot more power armor here, a lot more Magitech armor. Most of the town's youths... Okay, so here, instead of taking their physical goods... Okay, that's an interesting one. Their royal family was slaughtered by the Empire. Their youth have been pressed into service in the Imperial military, though I suspect none of the soldiers patrolling this town come from it. In fact, if the Empire is smart, like what I imagine is that probably not all the nations on this continent were friendly with one another. If they were smart, they would have soldiers from one area patrol an area that wasn't friendly with them. But anyway, you can see how the Empire grows their power almost exponentially. They come in, they destroy the prior leadership, creating a dependency on them, and then they take an entire generation into their military, leaving the town even more dependent on them. It's horrifically efficient. And I think that's something that really characterizes the Empire in this game, is they're not like the villains of some of the prior games in the series, who had really convoluted plans. The Empire is much more straightforward, much more brutal, much more efficient. You know, they do what it takes to destroy their enemies. That'll be important much later in the game, the cave to the east. You know, there's the mother frantic that her child is out playing, out wandering the streets, and he is just playing innocently. We saw him on the banister down there, but he's at risk from the soldiers if they decide that they don't like him. That's the horrifying thing about this, about being under colonial oppression, imperial oppression, is every second you have to be conscious of your oppressor. You have to maintain an awareness of them to protect yourself. You have to know where they are and what they want, and you have to do it, or else they kill you. It's no way to live. It's really seriously horrific. And what I love about this is that this gives us such a great sense of sympathy for the Empire, because in past games, you know, we go to the Empire. I think it's actually called the Empire, if I remember right, in Final Fantasy II, the Japanese Final Fantasy II, and if I remember right, it's a dungeon, it's a fortress. I know in Final Fantasy IV, you know, the moon, where the villains are coming from, the Tower of Babel that they use as their base, those are all dungeons. There are no, you know, shops, there are no townsfolk talking about how they're oppressed by the same villains that you're fighting. Here it's different. Here, for the entire game up to this point, the Empire has been this monolithic evil. But now we see something other than their soldiers. We see the people that they rule over, that they've conquered, and we begin to get a sense, you know, we've already kind of gotten that from, you know, the existence of Celeste and Leo. There are good people in the Empire, but they're still soldiers. They're still part of a military machine. Now we begin to see what it's like outside of that military machine. What it's like for the people who are impressed into service, not as soldiers, not as a direct part of the machine, but, you know, the townsfolk who are forced to turn over their lives to support of the machine. You know, it's an unusual move for games of this era, and a powerful one. Here's a desert in a location that makes no sense, but the makers of this game have already thoroughly established they don't know how rivers work, so not understanding rain shadows is in character. These are some pretty good enemy designs also. I like the wyverns a lot. They just look cool. I mean, you would not think that that kind of hot pink color would work, but it works. But yeah, they're, you know, this whole continent, like, the Empire does not actually succeed in maintaining order, despite the fact that I've been talking about it being identified with order the whole game. The mere fact that there are random encounters here show the Empire has utterly failed to maintain order, because of course it does. That's an impossibility. What it's accomplished... Right, can't suplex a flying enemy. All that it's accomplished is control over the people, which is all it really wants to accomplish. They've seized control of all of these, you know, innocent lives, innocent people, all of these countries, and they don't really care about the fact that monsters, possibly of their own creation, are running amok across the continent. sorry, I've got a point I want to make, but it's going to have to wait until we reach Miranda, which I'm really close to, but I keep getting interrupted by Ralphs. But if we can just get past those... Come on. Almost there. Ugh, I knew that was going to happen. Oh, hey, different enemy type. But still basically the same thing. I think we've seen palette swap of these before. That's okay. Bugs burn. So yeah, the last city left here on this continent, while I... he's done with Stray. Is anyone else done with... No. Okay, well, I'll stick with Stray for a little while, I guess. But yeah, the reason I want to specifically talk a little bit about Miranda is because of a line from Cyan earlier in the game. Cyan. That Celeste torched Miranda. The city doesn't much look like it was torched, so one interpretation would be that that's just a rumor. That's an exaggeration of something that happened, or it's something that didn't really happen. It's just, rumors spread among the Empire's enemies that they had committed this war crime. Or this is the degree to which they've rebuilt. Nobody here pays much attention to Celeste. There's no, special reactions to her. But you notice, there is a difference between this town and the others, which is, there were no Imperial soldiers guarding the entrance. They're just having fun, staging a dogfight. Which is kind of absurd. But they're not actually engaged in any kind of patrolling or anything like that. This is a town that's beaten. This is a town where the Empire, or at least the soldiers stationed here, aren't worried. And this is... the soldier chasing the girl around just has really horrific implications. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens under Imperial rule, regardless of the Empire. Yeah, we've got more people being pressed into service. The town is damaged. It is notable that the town is very small. Perhaps it was once bigger, and the rest of it was burned. Regardless, whatever happened here, the soldiers are laid back because they know there's no danger of any further uprising. Like I was saying, this is a town that's beaten. This is a nation that lost to the Empire. So yeah, those are three little glimpses, and they're very good glimpses, of what life under the Empire is like. Towns that are crushed, towns that are defeated, towns that are half in ruins, soldiers either on every street corner, or taking over the local tavern and messing with the waitresses, or chasing women around in the streets, or staging dogfights. There's no checks on their power at all. They just do what they want. And everywhere has monsters across the countryside, but there's something, I don't know, there's just something slightly off about the monsters in the Empire, and I can't put my finger on what it is. Maybe it's the presence of the Jokers. They creep me out for some reason. But what... Oh, I learned a lot in that battle. Whatever it is, there's just something really off about this continent. And a big part of that is the presence of the Empire. They've definitely put their stamp on it. But, you know, that's what it's like in the places they've conquered. One of the big questions we haven't looked at yet is what is it like to be, you know, a citizen of the Empire itself? Because there's all these people outside. But what about the people inside? You know, the people they've conquered, yeah, they treat those badly, but that's a conquered population. How do their own people fare? And that's something we'll see in a minute when we get to Vector. And it's... interesting. Because one of the questions we haven't addressed much is, okay, the Empire represents order. Let's take that as a given, but what order does it represent? You know, there's more than one possible kind of order. There's more than one way to organize a society. Even in sense of being, you know, totalitarian, authoritarian, there's more than one way to organize that. So, what are some specifics about how the Empire is set up? Now, obviously, there definitely does seem to be, you know, military authority is a major thing. At least in the conquered areas. But, you know, what kind of civilization are they? We've seen glimpses. We've seen, you know, they're technologically more advanced than most of the other countries. You know, they have the Magitech. They have... oh, bloody... no autocrossbow for me. Oh, well, I guess I didn't need it. But yeah, they've got the Magitech, they've got this giant fortress city that we're about to enter. They're technologically advanced, which does give us some clues as to what they are, because now we enter the Empire itself, and first of all, the music is dark. It's at once ominous and sad. And if we refuse to pledge allegiance to the Empire, to this random woman, we get attacked. By, I should note, incredibly weak enemies. But, as it turns out, yeah, that was a test. She's with us. Not pledging loyalty to the Empire is the answer, because that's something already we can see. Unlike the conquered towns, here in the heart of the Empire, there is a possibility of rebellion. People here aren't quite as downtrodden. Their houses haven't actually been smashed, even if they are rather dingy. And so we get the possibility of rebellion. We get people who... yeah, but on the other hand, we get this guy. The other side's sure to lose. I have no idea what that guy's problem is. Oh, I really don't know what he's talking about. If I recall correctly, this inn, you get robbed if you stay there, so I'm not going to. So these are presumably Mirandans who came to the big city to look for work. Yeah, no, we definitely get robbed here. These are Mirandans who came here for look for work, and they're, you know, the only available option is to go into the military. Right. And this is the main reason we came here, of course, is to go into the Magitech Research Facility. But looking around, like, what we can really see... oh, there's... you know... the big symbol of the Empire. And this upper level. There are definitely people who respect non-magic. Oops. So yeah, you notice we had a lower level that seemed a little downtrodden, less so than the rest of the world, just a little bit. And now here on the upper level, suddenly it's military everywhere. And that's beginning to tell us already, you know, what kind of an order we've got here. It's a hierarchy, of course, but it's specifically one where the military is above everyone else, which, you know, makes sense for an empire built on conquest and military expansion. But in the end, it almost doesn't matter, because the more important point is that there's the military at the top, and presumably the military has its own hierarchy. So the leaders of the military are at the top, and then the rest of the military below them, and then the rest of the citizens of Vector below that, and on down the hierarchy to the conquered people and the not yet conquered people, the enemies of the Empire. It's a hierarchy, and like any hierarchy, ultimately it's built on this notion that some people are better than others, and the best should rule while the worst suffer. That's the core concept of any authoritarian hierarchy. And the thing is, like, we say, oh, that's just the Empire, they're obviously evil, we're not, we would never be like that, except we are, aren't we? Because isn't the best should be in charge while, the people in the middle work for them and the people below that suffer? Isn't that basically how capitalism works? Where we define best as ability to acquire wealth. So you've got, the owners in charge, the middle class working for them, and the poor suffering. And that's treated as, this divinely ordained way that things ought to be, but it's really no more natural than Vector, than this military hierarchy. Because it doesn't matter whether you call it meritocracy or elitism or capitalism or racism or sexism or authoritarianism or military dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. It's all the best should be in charge, people in the middle should work for them, and the people on the bottom should suffer. And, it's just not right. There's just no good reason to live that way. Except that we always have, which is a terrible reason to do anything. So that's my bit of, revolutionary leftist anarchist thought for the day. Getting back to Final Fantasy VI. So we're now in the Magitech factory. And it's notable that this is a research laboratory, but it's set up more like a factory. And I think that's interesting because it's designed to exploit living creatures, the espers. It reminds a little bit of Japanese whale research vessels, which, of course, actually exist to capture and slaughter whales. Research is it's a pretty open secret that the research is a transparent cover for whaling. And it's kind of the same thing going on here. Like, they say research, well, what this really is a factory. This is a place for mass-producing Magitech. It's a place where the military gets their weapons. And it's a place pretty dense with pretty tough enemies, too. Appropriately so. I find the fact that the enemies here execute programs interesting and creepy. It suggests that they themselves have been, well, programmed. Remember, these are the same people who used the slave crown on Terra. It's entirely possible that they've been experimenting with soldiers that go beyond taking orders and are actually programmable. Also, just a word for the fantastic music here. It's a wonderful use of, I thought that led to the treasure chest. Can't believe I fell for that. But it's a wonderful use of, like, these industrial sounds to create a music that's really different from anything else in the game so far. It really feels like a factory. Unfortunately, it is a factory, for want of a better term, of, well, evil. And as we'll see next time, there's some really horrific stuff going on here. Because, of course, the other thing about research that's also a factory, that's also abusing intelligent, living beings, is, of course, the Nazi allegory. The Empire does Nazi salutes at the beginning of the game. They do, they have the whole authoritarian military thing going. Magic is substituting for, magic, I've said several times, is readable as being a nuclear allegory here. So the Empire is pretty readable as being Nazi-like, which makes this, this factory that is also a slaughterhouse, as we'll see, is basically readable as a concentration camp. Yeah, I can't get up there, I need to use the hook. Which is not necessarily executed that well, because fantasy versions of the Nazis also often miss one of the most important things about their programs, which is the sheer pointlessness of them. Like, when you make it so that the Nazis are, slaughtering 6 million Jews, and I don't know off the top of my head how many Romani and gay people and everyone else, disabled people and everyone else that they were killing. When you make it so that that's part of some, magical research, or that they were searching for the Ark of the Covenant, or anything else where it actually served a purpose that is achievable and does something other than just killing people, it's kind of missing the point that they really were just killing people. Like, people sometimes talk about, like, the Nazis' medical research, but what doesn't get talked about much is how worthless that research was. Like, it really was just pointless sadism that taught no one anything of value. Because that's really all that it was about, was hatred. Pointless, seething, violent hatred. And that particular kind of hatred that comes from believing yourself to be strong and others to be weak. It's bullying isn't a strong enough word for it, but it's the same kind of concept. It's this sadistic glee in having power and wielding that power. And the Magitech Factory, I think, to a degree, misses out on that. Because something is actually accomplished here. Because they actually succeed in creating weapons out of it. It makes something like, Sen or Miranda much more, that's much more fitting for, I guess, the Nazi allegory. The fact that actual research is going on here, that the researcher is a sympathetic character, it weakens it a bit, I think. On the other hand, I mean, there wouldn't be a game if the Empire weren't achieving something here worth us coming after to destroy. See, and here's prototype Magitech armors also executing programs. I mean, at the same time, there's, I guess, something to be said for the equation of that kind of manufactured mass death. Because the Espers are, being held prisoner and being subjected to horrible experiments and so on and so forth. There is something to be said in equating that to a munitions factory, because, for starters, because they were, Holocaust victims were used somewhat for manufacturing slave labor, basically, but also because when it comes down to it, how much difference is there really between a factory that manufactures death in the form of weapons and a factory that manufactures death in the form of applying the techniques of mass production to killing large numbers of people on the spot, which is essentially what the Holocaust did, is they were applying things learned from mass production to the project of slaughtering people. Is there really a difference between those things? Is there a difference between a military factory that makes weapons for a conquering empire and setting a village on fire or, executing thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people? The people end up dead either way. So why do we regard one as being okay and one as very much not? I'm not saying that, by any means, I'm not at all saying, even remotely, that the Holocaust is not a bad thing. I'm saying that we need to come up with a good argument for why that's actually worse. And I think key is, first, the fact that you're targeting, at least in theory, military weapons can be used defensively. There's no defensive genocide. And there's also, with presumably military weapons are going to primarily be used to target military targets, which we regard as generally better than, attacking civilians. But, I don't know. With where the Empire is concerned, does that distinction matter? Because the Empire attacks civilians all the time. The Empire torched Miranda. The Empire wiped out Doma. So maybe it does make sense to equate these things, to merge them into a single location. I really should have healed after that last fight. Oh well. At least my horribly wounded people are on the same side of the enemies. So, what else really is there to say? It's certainly an interesting choice to equate those two things. I think it makes sense to, in particular, associate the Empire with industrialization as far as the thematics of this game is concerned, because it is an imposition of a kind of organization that, profoundly altered the way our world works, and in particular how wars are fought. And that's really what we see here. Like, nobody else, like, Figaro has machinery, but in Figaro that machinery is implied to be the work of one tinkerer, Edgar's dad. What the Empire is completely different. The Empire is a machine. The whole Empire is a machine. It is not a place where machinery is found. It is a place that is a machine. And that's a little bit scarier. That ultimately is why all the people here are either in the military or oppressed. Because they're all in service to a machine. And the pilot of that machine is... Ooh, that worked out well. The pilot of that machine is Gestahl. And that's really the danger represented by order in this game. Is not, with Celeste we have this notion of ice, but that's not really the order that we're looking at. It's the order of the machine. It's the order of the factory. The grinding of people. And I guess that's about it. So, I'll see you all next time.